On this week's full-time roundup, UCL is in full swing. We talk about the biggest storylines of this weekend, and we end on predictions. Full-time roundup starts right now. Welcome in to another episode of Full-Time Roundup number 51. It is an early morning record for Matt and I on this beautiful Thursday. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. Daniel dropped a championship episode with Ewan on the YouTube yesterday, so go check that out, especially as it's in full swing. Got some games this weekend, so there's a lot of storylines to check out there. Me and Harrison also dropped a betting show on Monday, and we'll be out with one later tonight. And then check out the team of the week that I dropped on YouTube on Tuesday. So a lot of content for you all, but hope you enjoy it. And most importantly, Matt, how are you doing on this early morning?
Very early. Welcome in, everybody. Thanks for listening. And no, obviously, you don't all listen when we record at 7:45 a.m. Eastern time, but appreciate you guys listening in. Good to be with you, Daniel. It sounds like you've got a lot going on behind the scenes for us. So, folks, if you are not checking out some of that content, please feel free to dive into it. Daniel and team are doing a fantastic job covering you from betting all the way through to everything to the championship and potentially some more along the way. So, ready to jump into the big stuff. Of course, we had Champions League this week, Daniel, and we'll have a big matchup over the weekend, too, that we want to cover quickly as we won't have an episode before that gets started on Sunday. But let's rock and roll.
All right, let's get into it. So we're going to start from Thursday's games and go to Wednesday's games, since we'll just go fresh off the memory here. And I wanted to start with Real Madrid skating by Leipzig. I felt that Leipzig outplayed Madrid in this at the Bernabeu, which you don't see, I would say, very often. If it wasn't to Openda's a couple of missed chances, I feel like this tie could have turned out completely different. But really, with Madrid being outplayed in the Bernabeu, do we put a ceiling on if they can go to the final or not? Or is this just a blip in the radar and they're just going to do what Real Madrid always do?
I think it's twofold, right? So I think, maybe threefold, actually. One is, can they get healthy? There's a lot of injuries, especially in the back line. Of course, some of those players are out for an extended period of time. No Courtois, no Militao coming back between now and the end of the season.
I saw Militao is back in training, potentially.
Potentially, but still, you got to be careful with an ACL and all that. So we'll see if he can get back in. And it depends on how far they go, right? Because they could – the next point I'm going to make is the draw, right? They could get drawn someone like Manchester City, who changes the entire dynamic of this. If they somehow manage to get more of a Bayern Munich, who are just in as bad a form as they are, then or PSG, maybe it's a little bit more, of an easier task to advance. But never count out Real Madrid, especially in the Champions League. We've seen it before where they really feel like they're the underdog. They're down in a leg, and yet they still find a way to advance. So I think there's an opportunity there. I do think also the third element of this is just if Ancelotti figures out his best team. It was a weird format. That's not the right word.
Formation.
Excuse me. Formation. Still early, no coffee. Weird formation that Ancelotti played, and I think it kind of was a detriment to the way that these guys play. Having Jude Bellingham play essentially as the lone striker up top, in the way that the formation was set up, it was a weird system that they played. Of course, Jude wants to come back and get the ball more in the midfield, play a little bit deeper, and come in late into the box off of Vinicius and Rodrigo, who, of course, Rodrigo didn't even start this game, having Valverde play. And so it was a weird formation at times, again, because of the way that Jude plays and doesn't necessarily play traditionally as a number 9. You had Ferland Mendy and Carvajal at some points up the middle playing more advanced than Vinicius Jr., at parts of this game. So it was just a weird way that they played. We were starting to see a little bit of struggle too. They didn't play very well against Valencia on the weekend. They got a draw. I think this Real Madrid team is not that great. We've talked about it, and you've talked about it with Ewan as well. Like, there's just a lot of talent, but they're not really a team this year. And I think they're getting away with it in a La Liga that is quite honestly pretty poor. And obviously teams have helped them out with Barcelona not playing well this year, and Atleti being, kind of in a demise since around the holiday period. Girona, I think we kind of take them as an outlier. That was just a great story that we've all talked about that, or I've talked about how I feel about that, how that's going to play out. But I think in Champions League, it's a different beast. But again, it depends on the draw, as it always does in the Champions League, and what they can figure out between now and when that draw happens. I think it's almost a month between now and when the quarterfinals happen. So they have some time to figure it out.
Yeah, you made some excellent points there. Whenever you mentioned Madrid and underdog in the same sentence, and that just doesn't sit right with me, but I have to agree when it comes to like being favorites for the tournament. They just have this little bit of magic in the European competitions that not many teams seem to have. It's going to be really interesting to see who they get drawn and kind of how that goes. I'm sure they're going to be kicking themselves because yes, they do have a decent gap in La Liga, but it's not comfortable enough where you can kind of neglect it and really put all your eggs in the Champions League basket. So we'll see how Ancelotti kind of, maintains the squad and everything. I'm sure they'll get a few injuries back by the time the next draw comes out. I think we have like almost a month before Champions League picks back up. But it'll be interesting to see how the team fares in that month leading up to it. Now, on the other side, we have barely talked about RB Leipzig, and I wanted to for just a second. Me and you, I wouldn't say we're in the Marco Rosa fan club, but over these two legs, he has coached phenomenally well with his game plan. I thought he got the game plan right both times, and it's a weird one, right? Because sometimes we'll see him coach a game and set up a game like this, and we'll be like, he is a great coach. But then when it comes to the Bundesliga, they'll go lose to like Bochum, and you'll be like, what the hell? Like, how is this team looking so much different than at the weekend or at the midweek fixture? So I just don't think we're ever going to figure out Marco Rosa and Leipzig, but that might be okay.
I was thinking about this last night as I was recapping the games in my head. No one wants to be in there, just a heads up.
Definitely not.
RB Leipzig are the Chelsea of the Bundesliga, is what I came down to. And
Well,
what
they're
I mean
not
by
10th.
that, well, that was unnecessary. What I mean by that is they can't finish, and it's a problem in the Bundesliga. Sorry, not La Liga or La Liga. It's a problem in the Bundesliga. It was a problem in this tournament here. And again, we've talked about how sometimes they have mental lapses on free kicks or go ahead.
They're fourth. They're fourth in goals scored per match,
but they still miss game. There's opportunities. You watch it week in, week out. I mean, where there's chances to score goals that would be impactful goals. There are games where yes, you're going to run up the score against a Darmstadt or Mainz, and they may not have. But my point is, when the goals need to matter, in this instance, Openda missed two chances early on that would have changed the entire tie. He had point blank range, one missed one off a corner, which was a great opportunity. And just again, that would have changed 2-0 up, changes the entire game. And that's my point, is that they need to find the goals when it matters, and they can't do that. And then again, defensively, we've touched on it where they have mental lapses on free kicks, or for whatever reason, they fall off the map for 5 or 10 minutes in a game, and it costs them. And that's exactly what Chelsea does week in, week out. Not to bring it back to Chelsea, of course, but it just made sense to me that comparison fits. And obviously, Chelsea being 10th is a testament to how strong the Premier League is versus the Bundesliga, and how they can still be at 5th, RB Leipzig. But it's to your point, is that Marco Rosa's fault? Partly. Is that the player's fault? Partly. So ultimately, they deserve to be out just because they didn't take their chances when they had them, and that's what this tournament's about. Showing quality, and quality shined where Vinicius Jr. has an absolute world class finish. and really kind of put the tie away.
Yeah, that's a good take. I mean, RB Leipzig are also very young, so you got to
Oh, it's
caveat
Chelsea.
that. So is Chelsea. Well, this is not about Chelsea. This is about
I
Leipzig.
know. I'm
But
done. I'm not.
but but yeah, no. So I mean, I guess you could factor in, but there's a plenty of young teams. I mean, this Real Madrid team is young, but also these are the cream of the crop of the young players. Leipzig, not so much, but still young, promising. Yeah, I mean, we talked about Openda and Sesko up top, two extremely high talents. One's 24, one's 21, and both will probably move on for big transfer fees in the next 2 years. Openda has done more of the goal scoring this year, but still in the big moments sometimes has lacked it, which is disappointing. But yeah, this match was fairly cagey. And then from the 64th minute to the 69th minute, say there's just two goals, two bang bang goals. So shout out to Leipzig. After going down a goal, you could honestly just mentally pack it up and just get slammed at the Bernabeu, and they respond immediately with a goal. It was a bad clearance by Carvajal to create the entire situation. But I wanted to at least give Leipzig a little bit of flowers just for how they set up. Now, on the other hand, we have City versus Copenhagen. And, I talked about this with Harrison a little bit, and I was basically just saying to him, like, we don't know how City's going to set up. We don't know how Copenhagen's going to set up, but I personally liked Copenhagen to give Pep a fit, even if it was at the Etihad. And then I saw the starting lineup. Holland was starting, so was Rodri. And the commentator was just telling me how decimated this Copenhagen squad was. And they had like 6 youngsters starting who haven't played in weeks. And I was like, oh no, this is going to be a blowout. And it looked like a blowout for the first 10 minutes, 2 goals immediately. And I was like, no, Copenhagen, don't do this to me. And then it kind of just, I mean, it was 3-0 at half, but they got a really nice, well worked goal in the second half, and they kept it respectable. And not even many Premier Leagues can keep it respectable with Manchester City. So I wanted to at least give Copenhagen credit for playing their game, sticking to what they wanted to do. And they didn't have the worst result in the world. Obviously, the aggregate was 6-2, but for a Danish team who's third in their league, I think that's a pretty good result for them.
Yeah, I mean, this was a perfect at the same time. Flip side of this, a perfect game for Manchester City going into the big one this weekend. You mentioned, of
Unfortunately,
course,
yes.
Holland and Rodri start, but other than that, Bob, Rico Lewis, Matias Nunez, Mateo Kovacic, who needed some minutes after being hurt, Akanji. There wasn't the full starting lineup. And even at halftime, Rodri came off. Julian Alvarez, Holland came off, excuse me, for a youngster. Mika Hamilton got some minutes. This was a training session, to be honest. I mean, from the first minute, this was a training session, and this was exactly what City wanted. Again, 45 minutes that they got from some minutes for Alvarez, Holland, Rodri to kind of get their legs still prepped like they would on a Wednesday before a Saturday game. And so this really wasn't much of a match. It wasn't a match. We talked about it last week that this wasn't much of a match going into this one, even with City up 3-1 already. And just to your point, City continue to score 3 goals. I mean, 3 goals every single Champions League game this year is remarkable. And they're just cruising. And again, sets themselves up really nicely for this weekend. De Bruyne, Foden, Kyle Walker, Bernardo Silva, Ake. They don't even have to sniff the field. They can just sit there in the jackets and on the sideline and enjoy the warmth of their puffies and get ready for Liverpool on Sunday. So this was exactly what you wanted, and not unsurprising. And it didn't help that the Copenhagen goalie gave City an absolute howler for the second one. So everything lined up exactly for City that you wanted it to.
Yeah, the ex-Liverpool man Grabara could have really done us a solid there and saved that and kept it close to make City sweat out a little bit more. But yeah, no, maybe it turns to rust. Definitely not. Just spin zoning that for this weekend, which we'll get into. But yeah, not really many many storylines or I don't know theories to come out of this match other than City's probably the clear favorite for the Champions League this year. Just every other team other than maybe Inter Milan for me are and maybe Arsenal are just not at that standard. And Arsenal is down 1-0 in aggregate, so we'll see if they can turn it around next week. But I wanted to talk about PSG versus Sociedad. Um, our PSG discourse is few and far between at times. Can't really put a handle on what Luis Enrique is doing over there. Then you have now the whole Mbappe drama when it comes to is he going to get hooked? Is he bought into the project? Is he already thinking about the Bernabeu? Like what is going through his head? But it was very apparent that he was hyper focused for this match as he scored an absolute beautiful brace. The first goal just completely cooked the defender and put it back post, reminding everyone who he is and that he is arguably the best player in the world when he wants to. But I wanted to talk about the second goal. That second goal, building out of the back, one touch football, and then a quick hit over the top for him to finish, which I didn't even know he had a like a what is it? Signature finish with the near post. I forgot that's his like trademark finish. And you would think that keepers would start to catch on, but he does do a good job of opening his hips where it's like, all right, there's no way he's going to go near post. And he's somehow just able to turn his body at the last second to completely juke out the keeper. It's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, there's a lot of places to start. Let's start with the goals themselves first. You mentioned the signature move, and um, I don't know if you watched the coverage afterwards. At least here in the States, we had Thierry Henry on CBS Sports breaking down his signature move, which is very similar, and just going far post instead of near post. But the way that you open your hips and kind of tee up the goalie for where you're going to go, and then you can kind of make that decision if you're going to go far or going to go near. But at least you kind of position yourself ready to give you that option. And of course, you mentioned that Kylian does a really nice job of kind of setting himself up, not always going for it, but that is obviously his predominant move is to go near post. And the counter to that from Thierry's part was, I'm going to go far post every time because you can't stop it. And it's coming, and that's the confidence in me of a striker, and that is what the elite strikers have, is that swagger and that
The it factor.
the it factor, if you want to call it. Yeah, exactly. Where they just know that they're going to deliver it time in, time out. The second goal, just to even get there, though, I think just shows how dangerous Kylian Mbappe is in all phases. Because, yes, the finish was fantastic. The way that he sets himself up, even as he walks down the field, that's not easy to do going at the speed that he's going at. And that's what I wanted to talk about was the speed. The way that Sociedad stepped up and pressed because they were already down a goal. First of all, the first goal was probably almost, if not better than the second goal, in my opinion. But to play a high line against Kylian Mbappe is almost asking for trouble
It's a
because
death
there's no
sentence.
way you can keep up with that speed over the top. And like you said, just some easy plays out of the back that with Sociedad pressing the way that they were, Kylian has a one-on-one with a defender. So long, you're not catching him. And so, that was a mismatch from the start. And okay, so now back to the other parts. Is he in for the project? No, that's clear, as he's already announced that he's not staying and he's leaving. Will he put the best foot forward for the Champions League? Yes, because there's two reasons. One, Paris has never won it. He's a Parisian at heart, as he was born and raised in Paris. He's a French national. He plays for the French national team. And also because he's a professional. And I think that's one of the things that no matter what you say about Kylian Mbappe, he's got an attitude or he's got this, this brazenness to him, blah, blah, blah. He's still a professional at the end of the day. He's signed with PSG until the summer, and he's going to deliver as much as he can for all the reasons I mentioned just a second ago. So I do think that in the big moments, yes, the league is maybe a different story where Luis Enrique can play around a little bit and kind of take him out of the lineup like he did against Monaco the other day and still kind of get some development there. They're still going to win the league. It's still the French league, which is not great. You're losing a talent like Mbappe, which is, of course, unfortunate in the long term. But in the big moments in the Champions League, he's going to shine. He's going to show off because that's what big superstars do. And he's a superstar in the sport, if not the superstar of the sport right now. So I was not surprised by his performance. I will not be surprised by his performances going forward in the Champions League. Now, the question is, how far can this team go? I don't necessarily see this team being a title contender for the Champions League. I think, again, it all depends on the draw, as we were going to say consistently with this tournament, as is always the case. But there is a ceiling. You mentioned a ceiling for Real Madrid. There is certainly a ceiling for this PSG team, and I don't think that they're, of the same status or ilk as Man City or even an Arsenal. And so I do think, depending on the draw, probably the quarterfinals, maybe a semifinal is the cap of where they get to in this year.
Never count out that man, Kylian Mbappe, though, to carry his team forward. 69 games, 69 goal involvements, as Julian Laurens tweeted out. There was also a stat when you mentioned that pace, his sprint or something like was almost on par with Usain Bolt's however meter sprint, which just shows not only is he a great footballer, but he is just an absolute athlete in all respects. Like he could probably pick up any sport, and just because he has that straightaway speed that some people talk about it, but not many people watch the Ligue 1, so I feel like they don't get to see it unless it's on the big stage, and he just happens to deliver on the big stage. Now, before we move on, I just wanted to ask you, obviously Mbappe to Madrid's going to happen, and that's going to be extremely scary. We might see Madrid completely take over the setting again, and City enjoyed their party, but now Real Madrid's here to stay. We could argue that. But when it comes to this PSG team and losing Mbappe, they have players. Do you think losing Mbappe is going to be a detrimental thing, or do you think it'll actually help PSG make a more of a balanced roster in terms of competing in the Champions League?
I've always said that this team needs to be a team versus a bunch of superstars. And we've seen this historically with PSG, whether that was, you go back to Beckham or Ronaldinho, or more recently with Neymar, Messi, and Suarez, Neymar, Messi, and Mbappe, trying to buy the Champions League, right? And there's only that so far that can get you. Of course, you can make the case City's doing the same thing, but that's a team.
They got Pep Guardiola too.
Exactly. Pep has built a team. There's a system. There's a way of playing. There's more than just the names on the back of the kits. So I do think this is good if they continue this process. There's some really good pieces there. I think Luis Enrique is a great manager to do it. We touched on that. He's just himself. He does what he wants to do, and I think that's a really good thing for this squad going forward. Now, again, they may need to add a piece here or there. That's still a big name, like a Rafael Leao or Osimhen if Mbappe leaves and they get, they need to kind of fill that void. But I don't think you're looking at signing the wrong piece. I think the point is Luis Enrique will look at the right player versus just the name and the cachet that comes with that. I think, yes, it might be a big name, but it's not just a big name for the big name's sake. I think it fits in with a structure that he wants to do and create going forward. So I do think this is the right move. I do think there's still a lot of work to be done. And of course, when you lose a player like Kylian Mbappe, that's a huge, huge hole to fill going forward. But, I think this squad, maybe not next year, maybe 3 years from now, will be very, very solid and very strong contenders perennially, not just a one-off situation for the Champions League going forward. And of course, they're going to win Liga almost every year. So I think you're going to have a chance to really be stacking the cards in your favor going in this project, looking at it from a Champions League lens, because until Liga gets stronger across the board, they're kind of the number one team to beat there.
Yeah, I thought you put that very nicely. On the other side, Real Sociedad's bad form, gets worse. It was 2-1, so it was respectable, but they have just, struggled for the last 2 weeks mightily. So we're gonna see if they can bounce back within the next couple of fixtures. But probably the most interesting game out of all of them, Bayern get a much needed victory over Lazio. They win 3-0, so it was 3-1 on aggregate at um I'm forgetting their stadium.
The Allianz.
Allianz Arena. I was, like Bayern had been all year. You didn't know if they were going to show up or not. You figured they'd, come amped up. They were so amped up that Thomas Tuchel, during his pregame speech, kicked something and broke his toe, which is probably the most Thomas Tuchel thing ever. But yeah, they did win 3-0. They were all over Lazio all game. Lazio had no answers for Bayern's press and how they were playing. And honestly, this result probably could have been worse.
Could have been worse, but also could have been a different game had Che Mobile put his goal away. Of course, a really, really good opportunity early in the match to off a deflected header, and fell to him and puts it over the bar.
Harry Kane puts that in, by the way. And he
Absolutely,
did.
absolutely, he did. Yeah, later on, not there, but later on. This was a match that was really confusing to me. Okay, because you understand watching Bayern Munich, and we've watched a lot of Bayern Munich this year through the Bundesliga.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately. That the way that you beat Bayern Munich is to press the midfield and to squeeze them, right? And to kind of get some pressure on Kimmich and Goretzka and Papovic, whoever's in the middle there. And for whatever reason, Lazio sat back and kind of allowed Bayern the ball and to kind of dictate the game. And of course, they're going to dominate a game when they can do that. The talent's there. They're definitely more talented than Lazio. And so this was a strange one to me, the way that they set up, the way that they played. I do think Bayern got it right in the fact that they pinched the wingers in, and so they couldn't really get that forward aggressiveness from the back if you're Lazio to kind of add men into the box. To be honest, I don't know if Lazio wanted to do that either way, but I do think that once Bayern set up the way they did, even if the wingers jumped, they were outnumbered in the back every time. It was 5-4 going forward for Bayern. And so I think there was a little bit of give and take there with Lazio, and Sarri was like, okay, I can't keep getting outnumbered here in the counterattack. Of course, it didn't take long for Harry Kane in the 39th minute to change the course of the tie. And then Thomas Mueller at half, basically at the final whistle of the halftime, basically puts this thing away 2-1. Once the aggregate flipped, it's almost impossible for Lazio to keep up because they're going to have to come out of their shell. They're going to have to get more aggressive, and Bayern can counter, which is essentially what they wanted to do and what they did. But yeah, again, I think Lazio gave them an out here, and Bayern said, thank you very much. We'll take that because we needed something here to help us out, and they needed it. And I don't know if this changed anything for the course of the season, but this is a big win for Bayern Munich, a big win for Thomas Tuchel to stay in the job to the rest of the season. Move on. I mean, I don't know what else to really talk about this one at home. They kind of were handed a gift, if you ask me.
Yeah, I was a little disappointed. Lazio definitely should have smelled blood in the water just off of recent performances. And they kind of went to the Allianz with kind of the same game plan that they did in the first leg, which is sit back, nick a goal, and then, pray to God that you have a good enough defense to sit back and hold off Bayern's attacks. When it comes to the Allianz Arena, I wouldn't say that's probably the best game plan. I would have really thrown everything I had at Bayern just because they are weak. They are a weaker side than they usually are. But, what can you say? Bayern's quality at the end of the day is always going to be better than Lazio's. So you're asking Maurizio Sarri and the lads a lot to kind of go out and throw everything in the kitchen sink at them with a 1-0 up in aggregate. They really, even when they were down, they still didn't really throw everything at the game, which was a little disappointing. But I mean, it is what it is. I feel like most people knew how this tie was probably going to go unless Bayern just decided not to show up. But Harry Kane.
That missed chance completely changed the game.
That is
If
true.
you're up 2-0 on aggregate, that's entirely different. You can play that shell game.
You can.
You can give up a goal and still be okay. Again, once the tie flipped, not only in the game itself, but the tie overall flipped, it was game over for Lazio there.
It was. And like we've said, a lot of times I think there is a ceiling on this Bayern team. So depending on how nice the draw is to them, they might be able to progress one more round, but I don't see anything above that. Um, so just
Who do
putting
you want? Who do you want if you're Bayern, or who wants to play Bayern? I guess.
who wants to play Bayern, Arsenal, City, Madrid, PSG. I'd say PSG would love a rematch against Bayern. I would really back almost anyone, to be honest, in this one. I just do not think against really, really solid sides, Bayern is that good. I'm
Would
trying to
you
think.
would you prefer if they advance? Of course, there's another round of matches next week, so we don't want to get too far ahead, and we could have a really fantastic quarterfinal. By the way, if everything shakes out well, if these two teams advance, do you rather play Bayern Munich or Borussia Dortmund in the next round if you can draw either one of those two, or
That's
can
a
they of course can play each other? But
that's a great question. Two really weird teams that we can't get our finger on the pulse with. I Dortmund are just weird in the Champions League. I think you kind of know what you're going to get from Bayern. I don't think you know what you're going to get from Dortmund, especially with the yellow wall too as a factor, which is arguably probably a better ground than the Allianz Arena. I don't know if that's controversial or not. I'd probably rather play Bayern at this rate. Um, but that take might come to haunt me in a few weeks now. But I'm probably going to go out on a limb and say I think just this Bayern squad are not that good. If you can answer the Kane conundrum and just shut him down, then absolutely Bayern. Because, I feel like he is really one of the main reasons. Him and Musiala are the two guys. If you can just really clog up the middle of the pitch and make Leroy Sané or the other winger who decides to play that game really beat you with one-on-one, and then, Kimmich and Goretzka as well. I feel a lot better about that than a Dortmund side who can kind of get a goal from anywhere in the attacking half. But that is a great question. Are you kind of on the same boat with me, or something different?
yeah, because we've talked about Dortmund that we just can't figure them out, and so to your point, any given day they can be a world beater or they could be beaten by the world. And so yeah, I think like it's a weird one. But Bayern Munich just seems to struggle. And again, they didn't play well on Tuesday either. So again, a lot to play out. There's still another round of games. Like I said, we'll have Arsenal Porto next week on Tuesday, Barcelona Napoli on Tuesday, the second game, and then Wednesday is Atleti Inter, which might be the match of the week next week, and then Borussia Dortmund, PSV Eindhoven. So, there's some really tasty potential matchups if all things fall to form. We could be looking at a quarterfinal of Manchester City, Bayern Munich, PSG, Real Madrid, Inter, Borussia Dortmund, Arsenal, and Barcelona. That sounds like a pretty nice final eight to me, but we'll have to see what happens. But there was still, Daniel, a tournament that happened on Tuesday, I believe, or Wednesday, excuse me, which was again another weird one. They did this last week too, which threw me off. But they had a Europa League game on Wednesday. Sporting played Atalanta. We've been talking about Atalanta pretty regularly on the show in the league and how either they've been kind of sitting on that fourth spot with Bologna. They looked pretty good in this game. I thought a 1-1 draw was not really a fair result for either side. I thought both teams probably could have gotten the actual result here, but maybe that means the draw was fair. But I thought it was a good game, and Atalanta hit the post 3 times. They had a bicycle kick goal called offside late in the game, but a really fun watch in Porto. Excuse me, in Lisbon, and a good first game for both teams. And now everything will depend on the second leg back in Italy.
Yeah, I'm very happy if I'm Atalanta. PS or Sporting Lisbon have been one of the better sides this year, just in all of top five European football. Ruben Amorim decided to rest some guys, which was, I thought, kind of interesting regarding just, I mean, they have played a ton of games as of late. They played the Portuguese Cup, then they played a domestic fixture, and then they have this, and then they have something on Sunday. So I wasn't really sure how he'd line up. I would have liked to see Gyökeres start this match because if Gyökeres is in, maybe this match would have finished differently. But it seemed like, you know, Atalanta was the better team and had the better chances, just in my opinion. So obviously, a tie uh, isn't the best case scenario, but it's certainly not the worst. You're going into your home next week or whenever it is, tied. So it's you have the favor there. So I would be nervous if I was Sporting because Atalanta are a good side. They somewhat outplayed you at home. So, but you can't really handicap this one just because both teams are on their day are really really good teams. So it's really who's going to show up more, and both don't have that much European experience. So it's hard to also to bank on memories of the past when you really haven't had many in European competitions. So this was probably the best draw of Europa League. So I'm glad it was kind of a standalone game so I could just enjoy it. But it's going to be really interesting to see how Gasperini versus Ruben Amorim set up. I think that's two very interesting minds in the world of football kind of going against each other. And you usually don't see these kind of matchups. That's why the Europa League and the Champions League is the best. So I'm really looking forward to the next leg.
Yeah, of course. It is next Thursday, and there's a huge lineup of games this Thursday. Of course, normal Europa League fixtures. So we'll cover those a little bit later in the prediction section. But real quick, I just wanted to cover a couple of storylines and get your thoughts on one or two of them. There's just a lot going on in the world right now. Couple across each of the leagues. So the big one in Italy, Juventus and Atalanta play. Both need a win just to keep pace with where they are in the table. Of course, like I mentioned, Atalanta sitting close to that fourth spot. Juventus fighting off AC Milan for second. So I'm just curious on that one quickly. Or we have West Ham again, another battle for a place in Europe, essentially, with West Ham trying to catch United for sixth place in the league, and then from there, can they catch Tottenham after that? But they've been bouncing back as well, and so either one of those two storylines stand out to you in particular. Of course, I think West Ham is a more close to home one, if you will. We cover the Premier League a little bit more extensively than some of the other leagues, but either of those two kind of stand out for a bigger storyline for you.
I'll touch on both of them quickly. When it comes to the Juventus Atalanta game, yeah, Juventus are in second, Atalanta are in like fifth place right now. So if Juve was to lose this game, then AC Milan they play Empoli. So AC Milan would probably not lock up, but move into that second position where Atalanta are kind of chasing Bologna's tail here. And Bologna actually has a tough fixture that we'll get to in a second against Inter. So if Bologna lose that and Atalanta win that, then this top five race that we try to predict week in, week out just got a lot more interesting. So that's what I kind of had there for just the storyline of, hey, look at this. This could really shake up the top five, top six of the Serie A table. Now, when it comes to West Ham playing Burnley and United playing Everton. Everton is hovering over that relegation spot, so a win would be really good. And this is a good time to be playing Manchester United. They're just not the team that they usually are. And I guess historically, they've been pretty mid for a while now. So I think Everton should have a pretty good opportunity to get something from this match. On the other hand, West Ham should be able to, do their business against Burnley because it's Burnley. And if United drop points, then West Ham's could be above them at the end of the weekend. And for a team who we haven't covered that much in West Ham, especially because they start out the season really well And then once Paqueta got injured, they just completely lost all their momentum. And now he's back, and they put a couple wins together now. If West Ham finish above United with the Europa League, selling players, don't even have a striker right now, I think that's obviously a testament of how good of a manager Moyes is, and that he should get more respect, but also how bad Manchester United are in the Premier League. I just couldn't believe that West Ham were 2 points off United. I honestly couldn't believe it. If you told me that a week ago, I'd been like, "You're crazy. There's no way." Just because I thought West Ham were really going to be more mid-table, especially with the European competition. So it's really impressive how Moyes has been able to navigate the European football as well as the Premier League and still compete in a way.
And yet they still want to potentially get rid of him as if he's not doing a good enough job for West Ham. What a crazy fan base and what crazy fans we all are in sport. But couldn't agree
Seriously,
with you more on that one. West Ham has been a fantastic story. I think this would be the best finish that they've had in a long, long time in the Premier League. Even if they stay where they are, if they can catch United finish sixth, of course he's gotten them in European football chance to even they won a trophy last year. They could potentially make another run here in Europa. Of course, last year Conference League. Take that for what it's worth, but still counts. Tottenham will take it, put it in their trophy case if they could. And so, yeah, I think it's a really interesting dynamic of a weekend as we're getting closer to the finish line of all leagues and all seasons. This is when things kind of shape up, and you need to look at not just only the top. Of course, there's some great races, some races that are pretty much played out or finished, but some storylines even in the middle sections that really have an impact for clubs and financial situations.
Before we continue with the storylines talk, I wanted to also mention and see what your opinion was on Ligue 1 changing from Uber Eats to Ligue 1 McDonald's, Mickey D's, the dollar menu, if you will. How funny, stupid, great is that? Like, where do you stand on that? Because Lons already kind of has that McDonald's. Like, I feel like they have that brand with the colors and how like the jerseys are already. I think they have the McDonald's on the jersey. How do you feel about the American McDonald's taking over Ligue 1?
It's more of the same for Liga. Of course, Strasbourg is American owned with Todd Bowley. Lyon is American owned. Sponsors, it's money. It's it's going to prop the league up if they can spend more money and get more TV rights or whatever. I think we've talked about it half jokingly. A lot of people call league a farmers league, and I think that's also part of the joke around the McDonald's thing is a little bit. But I think a company like McDonald's, a global brand that has the backing of and the name and the money behind it, can only help improve the league. I'm trying to put a nice spin on this. But we'll see what happens. Honestly, there's worse sponsors for a league than McDonald's, to be honest, and we don't talk about that. So
They should make every stadium have the golden arches outside, so you're walking through into the stadium with those big old golden arches. I'd love.
This is still a professional league, ladies and gentlemen. Let's not get carried away with ourselves here, okay? So
I'd love to see them lean into the Mickey D's dollar menu. Now, just a couple of things real quick. We have a relegation battle between Calgary and Salernitana. That'll be pretty interesting in regards of the Serie A relegation race. And also in Ligue 1, Brest play Lens. And Brest has been one of the best stories that we haven't really mentioned on the show. They're second. They were in a relegation scrap last year. So I think that if they get a result against Lens, then this team is for real, and they should be up there for one of the biggest surprises of the season. I wanted to at least cover that just shortly because it's not being talked about enough, and we had a little bit of spare time today, so I wanted to at least cover that. Keep an eye on them. Eric Roy or Waugh is a very interesting coach. It seems his CV, if you will, isn't the traditional one, that's for sure. So I would look into that story on Brest. Might do a short on that in the next couple of weeks just to deep dive into their season. But I wanted to at least let you know about that. Now we have the preview section here that will go. I pick a bunch of games. We talk about it. We're going to include some storylines in here as well. So starting off, Manchester United versus Everton. Don't know if it's going to be a fun one, if it's going to be a boring one, but how do you see it playing out?
There's not usually a Premier League nap game, but you found the Premier League nap game this week. This could be one of the more boring matches of the year. Just going to point that out. I'm going to say 1-1. I don't know why. I don't trust United. I don't know if Højlund's playing. If Højlund plays, it changes things just because at least they have a presence up front. I'm talking myself out of this as I keep going. I'm going to say 1-1, but this is going to be one of the I am not getting up at 7:30 to watch this game. I'm just going to point that out right now.
Yeah, I don't think Højlund's going to dress for this one. So now that you said it's going to be a boring game, I'm going to go ahead and take the over. Pencil me on the over for that. I think this could be goals galore. I also
it could because both goalies are awful.
Yeah,
it could go either way.
I'm gonna say a draw at 2-2. I think Everton get a point here. So I kind of liked what you had to say there. It is at Old Trafford, but that doesn't really mean anything because United can't really play well at Old Trafford, it seems. So the home ground is not a fortress, if you will. Arsenal versus Brentford. Arsenal are in frightening form, but this is a huge game before their Porto draw next week. Brentford are an odd team. Obviously, they tied Chelsea last game on a 2-2 finish, but they're a little bit hot and cold, if you will. So don't really know how to favor this one.
I think this one's about how many goals Arsenal scores. I've been trying to give the teams that Arsenal play. At some point, math has to add up that Arsenal can't win every game this way and can't win every game. And so I've been trying to say which one it's going to be, and eventually it will happen. I probably won't take Brentford in this one. It's at the Emirates, so give me Arsenal 2-0. But eventually Arsenal can't keep scoring goals like this. But Brentford are just abysmal right now.
Arsenal, well, that means Chelsea's abysmal. So, but that's a conversation for another day. Arsenal do play at home, which
I think we've talked about that all season, by the way.
Yeah, we have. Don't think we'd use the word abysmal though. Arsenal are at the Emirates, which that matters quite a bit. So I'm going to say 3-1 Arsenal. I think Brentford scored though for sure. And they give them a little bit of trouble early on, and then Arsenal eventually pull away. Now we have Werder Bremen versus Dortmund. Dortmund could use a win here to feel good for their next tie against PSV at home. So how do you think this one's going to shape up?
Yeah, I think Dortmund needs this as well to keep in that fourth place spot
that
with
too.
Leipzig. So give me Dortmund here. Although, of course, we talked about it earlier. Just never know what team is going to show up. It's on the road. But I'll take a 2-1 Dortmund win. Something feels like they're coming back a little bit to finish this year out.
Yeah, Leipzig do play Darmstadt, the worst team in the Bundesliga, so they need a win bad, like you mentioned, to keep pace for that fourth place spot. I'm gonna go a 2-1 narrow Dortmund win is how I'm gonna predict this one.
Oh boy, same score, so they're definitely gonna lose now.
You said 2-0.
I said 2-1.
Oh, sorry. I just didn't hear you. My fault. Now Bologna Inter in the Serie A. Bologna have been one of the best stories of the season. They have, they're in a gauntlet of fixtures right now. They beat every single team in that gauntlet or tied. But this, as Thiago Motta is getting, recommendations for several big jobs here, this is a great benchmark to see where he is at in his manager against the best manager in Serie A currently, Pippo Inzaghi. Or it might be Simone Inzaghi, excuse me. But Inter might rest some guys, I would imagine, for the Atletico Madrid game coming up on Wednesday. How do you think this match plays out?
1-1. even with the resting of players, which I agree with you, I think they do. They can focus on Champions League now all the way to the finish line with a 15-point lead in the league. I do think they have more talent, but I do think Bologna finds a way. I love what Thiago Motta is doing there. If Bologna can get 3 points here, they close the gap just to 2 points on AC Milan without depending on what happens in the weekend. But I do think Inter have enough here to get a draw. But they definitely it's a reserve lineup or a B side lineup for Bologna. So keep that in mind when you watch this game and watch that result as well.
Absolutely. Lon's Brest kind of touched on it before about Brest's miraculous season. Do they keep up the magic here? Lon's do play today, so that might have a little bit of a factor on how they set up at the weekend. But do you think Brest will be able to get it done?
I do. Yes, I do. 1-0 though, not very convincing.
1-0. I'm gonna go 1-1 here. I think this is a draw. Has all the makings of a draw here. To go to back to the Premier League, Villa versus Spurs. This is what you call a 6-pointer here, as Spurs is behind Aston Villa, so they could almost leapfrog, or no, they would be catching up. I think within 2 points or 1 point of Aston Villa. Aston Villa do play today against Ajax, which could change some things on how they set up this weekend, like I mentioned before. Do you think Big Ange has the know-it-all to kind of get Aston Villa here, or do you think Aston Villa are just too good with Unai Emery at the helm?
This puts the loser in a really weird spot, and especially if it's Spurs. I think we touched on it maybe last episode or an episode before, where it would really just kind of leave Spurs in a no man's land for the rest of the season if they lose this one. I think Unai Emery has enough to get it done. So I'm going to say 2-0. Ollie Watkins probably scores one. And yeah, I think Villa extend their lead over Spurs to 8 points for that last Europe Champions League spot. It gets a little strange for Spurs going forward.
Spurs do have a game in hand, so it's not completely over if they lose. But
no, but
getting
it's still a weird spot. Yeah,
it is a weird spot. So getting at least a point, if your Spurs, is probably the priority here at Villa Park. I'm gonna say it'll be a 2-2 draw. To go to the Bundesliga, Frankfurt versus Hoffenheim. Both Hoffenheim, as of late, have gotten hot, have climbed up the table. Frankfurt are in the top, 6, if you will, kind of close to each other. How do you think this one shakes out?
Both teams are not great. Frankfurt 2-1.
Frankfurt 2-1. I have no idea. I'm going to say 1-1 draw here. I could not tell you on this one. I'm going to say 1-1 draw.
Frankfurt should be the better
they
side.
Should.
So that's
they
why
should
I'll
win.
take the 2-1. But
I think Hoffenheim do have some guys missing, so that might help them within their quest.
They've been a nice surprise, though, by the way, Hoffenheim. Hoffenheim have been a nice surprise this season.
Matarazzo, the U.S. American coach at the helm, I'm loving what I'm seeing there. I think he's probably the most qualified manager of any American right now to coach anywhere. Like we mentioned before, Juve, Atalanta, don't really have to preview it that much, but who do you think wins?
Atalanta. I don't like Juve, and I don't like the way they've been playing of late. So give me Atalanta 2-0. I don't see how Allegri scores right now.
I'm gonna go 2-1 Atalanta, but they're known for their tight defense, and it's been rather leaky lately. So I think Atalanta are able to expose that. We have Roma, Fiorentina, another top 6 battle here in Serie A. A lot of good matchups in Serie A this weekend, so definitely tune into Paramount Plus for that. Do you think
not sponsored?
Not sponsored. No free ads. De Rossi versus an upcoming manager and Fiorentina's manager, who I'm forgetting right now. How do you think this one kind of goes?
I would love Roma to win this. I would love Roma, Atalanta, and Bologna to win, just so that this race gets really, really fun. It's already fun as it is, that battle. But then if all 3 teams win, AC Milan is not out of the picture for third. So I would love Roma to win, and I just love the story of De Rossi, what he's done with this squad too. I think he's got a big edge over Fiorentina here.
Yeah, I'm gonna
Oh,
I'm gonna pick
score line 3-0.
scoreline
Sorry, 3-0.
3-0. Wow, that's bold. I'm gonna go. It's at a pick 'em right now. I'm gonna go 2-0 Roma. I think Roma get it done as well. Now the game
The
that
big one. The
the
big
big
one.
one, and we can talk about the game before giving predictions here. This has been living rent free in my head all week long. It's all come down to this. It feels this whole season, this miraculous Jurgen Klopp farewell tour. It feels like it all comes down to this, and it is at Anfield, which is nice to have in your pocket, but I'd say probably City are the better team as of right now. Now, Liverpool do play Sparta Prague in the Europa League today. So, depending on how they set up and who plays and who doesn't, Mo Salah is back, set to feature in this Europa League fixture. So, Nunez, Dominic Szoboszlai, Indo, all back as well. So, they are getting healthy before this game. They are just not going to be in that mid-season form like City is. With that being said, I guess give me your predictions.
You maybe nailed the point at the beginning that this means so much to Liverpool that not that it doesn't mean anything to City. It does. But if you guys were to lose this game, I think that's the end of your season in the Premier League. It's weird to say that because you're at the top right now. You have the perch to view down on everybody.
Not a big perch,
But
but it's a
it's
perch,
not,
I
but you're
guess.
still there. They still have to come
Yeah,
get you.
that is
But
true.
my point is that City, you don't feel like City losing or even drawing this game is the end of the world for them. They're going to still win out or have a nice run again, even if they were to, this is a stumbling block. It's a big one if they lose, of course.
They
To
do play
me, though,
Arsenal later
I
too.
know, and I'm saying that where I was getting to is this stretch of games that they have right now is vital. I think they need 12 of 15 points in the next coming games here. And so, of course the run is they got 3 already. So they need 9 of 12 left. They have Villa, they have Arsenal, they have you guys, and they have Newcastle, I believe is the next run of games. And
Gauntlet.
so and I said this a couple weeks ago, this is going to determine the title. So I'm going to go City get a draw, 1-1 draw, and that's enough for them right now because I think you'll eventually drop some points along the way. I think it could be a 3-1 City win. That's my prediction is it's a draw or a 3-1 City win. I don't think Liverpool gets a result here, just given the injuries and everything that's gone on the last couple of weeks.
I think that's very fair. This also could be Jurgen Klopp and Pep's last dance, if you will, in the Premier League. So a lot of storylines.
It is, right? It is the last dance.
It is. The biggest storyline out of all is that two great managers go against each other one more time as they've kind of fought tooth and nail every single Premier League season. I was talking to Ewan about this after our championship episode, and I tended to agree with him as well. He said the first 20 minutes are what's going to dictate how this game goes.
100%.
So
100%.
it's how both teams set up, how the first 20 minute goes will really answer a lot of questions on Sunday when we talk about it. Got the noon kickoff, which is nice, or almost noon kickoff. It's hard for me I'm such a mess right now. I really don't know. I'm gonna say a 2-2 draw. 2-2 draw. I think Anfield is going to be able to get us at least a point here. It's going to be a ruckus atmosphere, and I'm looking forward to it. Now, predictions are said. If you're still listening to this episode, thank you so much. Make sure if you're on the YouTube to subscribe and like our videos. If you're listening to this on podcast form, go ahead and give us a 5-star review and download the episode. And if you haven't already, go ahead and follow our Twitter or our X at Fulltime Roundup. You can always find me and Matt's handles in the bio if you want to chat shit about Liverpool losing this weekend or Chelsea being abysmal. And thank you so much for your continued support. And we are going to look forward to speaking with you on Sunday.